Welcome everybody to another edition of one of the regions Santa Cruz. Joaquin works on tournaments, scheduling, handles part of the seating issue, and he's the guy that every weekend has a tournament going on throughout the season, boys and girls, and some stuff in the summer. Joaquin, thank you for joining us. Can you give us a little background on your journey to the region office?
Yeah, I've been, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I have been a part of this region for 18 years. I started playing as a junior on the boys' side, obviously, uh, as a 16-year-old. I played for Litchfield Park Juniors and Zia Athletic Club, which Eric, actually, you were an owner of, or the owner of. Um, I started working for the region in my current role 4 years ago. So this is my fourth girls season. Um, I played my college volleyball at Ottawa University in Surprise. And yeah, that's kind of my background and kind of what I'm currently involved. Still coaching. I coach at Arizona Fear Volleyball Club. Also coach at Brophy High School. Um, that's kind of my job or
And
my
also with high
background.
performance, right?
Yep, and I also do high performance coaching as well.
Yeah, so you're pretty busy throughout the year. So
Yeah, a little bit.
yeah, but I'm assuming girl season gets you a little bit busier. So we're going to talk about tournaments and things like that. But how does the Arizona region, the way we do our tournaments, differ from the other 39 regions in USA volleyball?
So the biggest difference is that we actually host tournaments. A lot of tournament or a lot of other regions, the clubs do their own thing, and it's very selective in how they choose who gets invited to their tournaments, things like that. Whereas the region having an open championship and club division is not very common across the country. Um, for the most part, we're one of the few left that actually host and run tournaments for our members.
Gotcha. So break down for us, for example, you pretty much in the girls season, you have tournaments nearly every single weekend, starting in the first weekend in January and going pretty much all the way through the middle of May, if I remember right. Can you kind of break down the process of how that works, how you go about getting gyms, how you go about, using AES, seating tournament, all everything. This might take a
Yeah,
while.
definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. So girls season is obviously the bigger monster between girls and boys season. Um, they require a lot more courts. Um, so I start reaching out to our region contacts throughout the valley. So AAG, different high schools, Sporting Chance, Yavapai colleges, other JCs around the state. Um, Typically about in August of the leading up to the girls' season to start putting out tournaments or start getting their dates and see who can host and how many courts we can get and things like that. So that is 4 months out, 5 months out. Now, the hard part is I go out and secure these courts or try to secure these courts, but we don't know the number of courts that we need until pretty much tryouts are done. Typically there are leading up to, I would say, the middle of December, we're getting clubs entries and things like that, and how many team numbers, and then that obviously fluctuates the court numbers. Um, so once we get that done, I can start securing those, which sometimes, it's nice, and I can secure the weekends exactly the numbers that they gave me. Sometimes, unfortunately, I lose weekends or lose courts on certain weekends because they had to go fill it with something else. Um, so that's kind of what, as far as like getting courts goes. Um, the seating process, I actually don't do the actual seating. What I do is club directors send their seating forms to me. I compile them in a huge spreadsheet, which then is broken down by age group, division, things like that. I send that out to our junior board or our junior committee, um, who is a seating committee of different clubs. So big clubs, little clubs, rural clubs, pretty much any. We try to get a representative from everywhere so that we get a fair shot through. Um, those people then meet and seed and do all of those things. And then I turn around and put them into the AES tournaments. Building an AES tournament does take some time. So I have to build out pools and brackets and crosses and things like that, and assign roughing teams. And some of that stuff is automated. There's obviously, like, if you do a pool of four, like, it's the same format every single time, with the same officiating teams, things like that. Now, where it gets my manual part, if we have cross matches or things like that, I have to go put those in. Um, those it seems like it's not a lot, but when you have 20 divisions of cross court matches or things like that, it does take some time. Um, Now, the hard part, I guess, with scheduling is we have teams from Tucson, from Flagstaff, from Kingman, from pretty much all over the valley. Um, Now, those outlying outside of metro area clubs, um, I have to really go into where everybody is with those clubs and make sure that I'm not scheduling a Flagstaff team in Tucson or a Tucson team in Flagstaff or Yavapai, things like that. Metro teams, unfortunately, like, we don't have enough courts in the valley for us to schedule everybody in Metro. So sometimes they do have to go to Tucson, sometimes they have to go to Yavapai, things like that. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of, and the way I keep track of that is I actually have a huge Excel sheet, that has every division, every pool. I highlight a lot of colors are used in there to branch out and show, um, which teams are Tucson, which teams are Northern, so on and so forth. And obviously if we have teams missing, things like that, there's a bunch of little nuances then that go into scheduling and stuff like that. Yeah, that's kind of a
Yeah.
very
What?
quick overview.
Yeah. What for parents that may not understand the actual like numbers here? What's our biggest division team wise, and then how many courts would you need to put on a tournament for that division on a Saturday or a Sunday?
Um, let's see here.
I gotta think
So
club division is probably the biggest, right?
club is historically the biggest. Yeah, I would say club is going to be the biggest weekend, because especially like once we get into club number three, which is usually our girls 10s division, which is what a new division that we added last year, and then the boys 14 spring division, so like the 14 and under group, usually play on the same weekends as clubs, so those get really big. Um, so to give you an example, like club number three back on February 22nd, like that was 55 courts. Which in a wave. So, it's 100 and was it 110.
Yeah,
Great, math is hard.
wow.
110 courts in on a day, that that we're using, and it's a lot of courts, and so that's why, I say we don't have as many courts as people think in the valley, or that it takes less than some people think, and that's why we have to be grateful that we have the facilities like Sporting Chance and Yavapai College and things like that, and sometimes that requires us to travel.
Yeah. Um, I know you said you really don't have much to do with the seating, but do you know how the seating committee kind of evaluates and puts teams together? You had mentioned the seating form, so parents might want to know that seating form kind of asks each club director, if I'm not mistaken, correct me. Hey, this is this team. Are they in the top 5%, top 10%, top 25, top 50, lower third, but lower like they kind of ask them, hey, where do you think this team will be? And usually this is asked before the teams even played a match, right? It's just a lot of
Right.
guesswork, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That form isn't perfect, and club directors aren't perfect by any means. They do their best of guessing and taking educated guesses on where their teams belong. Um, I like to believe that everybody does put themselves in the best place that they, or the place that they think they belong. Sometimes you think a team's going to be really good, and it doesn't always pan out. But yeah, that form, basically what a club does is they list all of their teams, in strength order. So let's say your 16 ones are better than your 18 ones, and your 16s is your best team. So you would rank them like the 16s and then 18s and then 17s, or however it may be. Traditionally, it's the 18 ones are typically your best team in your club. And you kind of rank them out. And then the other questions in there are like, how many returning players do you have from that team? How many, where did that team finish last year? How did the Where would you see, where do you see them in their age group? Where do you see them in your division? Those kinds of questions. And like I said, they're doing this before the first seeding tournament, and that's why we make our seeding tournament, or at least try to do this in the most perfect way, or at least the way we think works. Is they're broke All the teams are broken up into quartiles, and so there can only be so many teams in the top 25%. So we put the group together, and then we put the next group of 25%, the next 25, the next 25, and the next seeding tournament. That's why we do the threes and fours from the top group and the first and seconds, and those kind of make that new wave so that they get an opportunity to move into those next quartiles. If that makes
Gotcha.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Tell me about how AES has helped, and for those that may not know, back when the region was in its infancy, we had an employee, Becky, who would literally do everything by paper and pencil, and would call clubs and let them know, or would leave a message on the phone and say, "Hey, your team is playing at this place at this time." But of course, back then there was maybe 200, 300, 400 teams in the entire region. How many teams do we have now? Do you know?
Oh gosh. I do know. Let me see if I can find it off the top of my head. I want to say we're like in the 800s, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, 800 teams. Yeah, so
Yeah.
quite a difference
Again,
from
that's just the
25,
girl
30
side.
years ago.
That's Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not even including the boy
like
side. I
the
want to
boys,
say
right?
that's just Yeah, we have quite a few teams for sure.
Yeah,
AES, like I mean, so we actually between paper and pencil and AES, I have to give a shout out to Lance Johnson too. Lance created some coaches and parents may remember if they had older kids. Um, we used to use was it volley? Oh gosh, volley score? Is that what score volley?
think so. Yeah,
Lance,
sounds right.
yeah, I'm sorry, Lance, if I messed up that name. But it was kind of our own version of AES that Vance was creating. We moved over to AES 3 seasons ago, I believe, the two or three, and the nice part is that clubs are no longer having to import their results into AES because they're already done. Um, so they are, because our tournaments are directly connected, they go into AES's databases. So when girls teams go to qualifiers, boys go to nationals, qualifiers, things like that, all of their results are already in there, versus clubs having to go back and uh, import them themselves or manually put them in themselves. So that's kind of the pro. It also allows teams just to see like schedules a little bit easier, kind of less paper, things like that.
Nice. I know that travel is an issue, and I know that the region, like you had said earlier, tries to keep those teams from like the White Mountains or really far, teams south of Tucson. We don't want them to travel more than 2 or 3 hours one way. We don't want them going 5 or 6 hours in a day. It's just not safe. And I know the region cares a lot about that, but there's you always hear parents talking about, well, we've had to travel so far the last 4 or 5 tournaments, blah, blah, blah. There is no agenda or no specific, club that has to travel more or less on your end. There's no way we're picking on this club. We're going to make them go to Buckeye, even though they're located in the Santan Valley. You're going to go to Buckeye. It just is based on where you have courts and what weekend, correct?
Exactly. And like I said earlier, on my spreadsheet, I highlight the Tucson teams and the northern teams, so that I know that I can't put them in Tucson or the northern area or Yavapai or things like that. Outside of that, I don't really look at teams when I schedule because I don't want to have that um, I guess human factor side of it of like, oh well, that's like I know somebody on that team. I don't want to make them travel. Like I don't do any of that because that would make my life really hard. I just put people in, right? Like I don't want to again create a notion that or try or even let there be one or an attempt to be one, that I have it out for a certain club or that the region has it out for a certain club or things like that. Like sometimes you just get the short end of the stick. I definitely have talked to parents before who are like, "Hey, we've played 4 tournaments and 3 of them we've been down in Tucson. Like, how do we get away from that?" And it's like while the team that you're one of the teams in your pool is a Tucson team, or two of the three, four teams in your pool are a Tucson team. So like you're going to go to Tucson. Like there are times, right, where I have to schedule to Tucson because let's say like we use Palo Verde High School a lot, who Zona Volleyball Club, actually Matt Dyke gets us those courts. So in order for us to use those courts, we have to put certain Zona teams there because they are coaches at that school. And so then they have keys in order to get us in the gym, things like that. So then if you're in that pool with that specific Zona team, you're going to end up going to Tucson.
Yeah. And so to that, then there's an advantage if you are a coach or an athletic director, somebody that actually has a gym, that you can offer up. There's a chance that your teams could actually play in that facility, correct? A chance.
Yes and no. I don't want to say yes 100% just because there are some schools and sites that have offered their courts for a long time, that obviously get the priority, if you will. Now, obviously, like we have no issue with new courts coming on and things like that, but I try my best to make that happen. Unfortunately, it's not perfect. So when new sites come on, I don't want sites that uh, you're only doing this so that your team can always be there, kind of, if that makes sense.
If the region hosts any specialty tournaments that are, set up, for outside of the normal region schedule, how do you guys deal with that? How do you handle that?
You're talking about like our like national qualifiers and things like that.
Things like that, yeah.
Yeah. So we host the Arizona National Qualifier. So we have three of them technically. And we do have a national division and then a select division in those tournaments. So those tournaments are one-offs, where they're age group specific and they're for national bids. The select division is a non-bid division, which teams are guaranteed 2 days of play and 5 matches. The national division is up to 2 days of play, and they're guaranteed 2 matches, with only 12 teams advancing to Sunday. So those tournaments, like I said, are a little different because the deadlines are typically 2 weeks to enter those tournaments before the tournament. And so then courts for that become a little different because I don't know how many teams I have, excuse me, until about 2 weeks out. We handle those pretty much the same way as far as formatting and stuff like that goes. Seeding is based on tournament or region standing. So if you're number one in the region, you're going to be number one in that tournament, or if you're the number two 18s team, you're going to be number two in the tournament, so on and so forth. The select division, same thing. Kind of very similar formatting to if you were to go to a qualifier, or things like that, just condensed into 2 days. That tournament is, like I said, it's usually a pool play, like a cross, and then a bracket or things like that. So kind of what you were asking. I don't know if that's if
Yeah,
I answered your
yeah,
question
yeah.
right.
And those qualifying tournaments are just for a bid into the national tournaments in the
Yeah,
summer, correct?
yeah. So the AZNQs, typically, depending on the age division, we have anywhere from 2 to 3 bids. The highest bid you can earn in a regional qualifier is national, which for those of you that don't know, open is the highest, followed by national, USA. I think it's Liberty, American, and then Patriot, or Freedom, then Patriot, something like that. Like they added Liberty and Freedom in the last couple of years, and I don't know the quite
Yeah,
sure the breakdown there, but
yeah. And those are all the divisions. When you go to nationals, you either qualify for 18 open or 18 national or 18. And so you're put into
right,
those divisions and then play within
right,
that division when you go to
right.
nationals, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think everything outside of, I believe Patriot is still the only like quote unquote like you can go to nationals and pay to play, if you will. So like you're not necessarily earning a
mm,
bid, but you still get the experience of nationals.
gotcha. Okay. Is there anything on the horizon that's going to change this system? Do you see anything that, or talking about anything that in the next couple years might change the way we do tournaments? I guess part of this is just logistically, are we getting too big and we don't have enough courts? I know we've already, a few years ago, we had to move the open division to Sunday because we literally just didn't have enough courts and enough room. And so that entire division was
Right.
moved to play on Sundays. Is there anything on the horizon that you see coming, perhaps with the growth of the region? Is there anything that you personally want to see? Maybe we look into and try to change something?
Um, growth is always a concern, if you will, and I would even say, I don't think concern is the right word. We grow every year. The only year that I know of in our past that we haven't grown was 2020, and that was because of the pandemic. Outside of that, uh, there's always new clubs popping up. There's more kids playing, which is great. I could see 12's championship kind of expanding, um, that new division that we created this year. So, for those that don't know, 12 championship is the top, more competitive 12s, if you will, whereas club 12s has become uh, more of the learning group of 12s. So I can see that group kind of growing also, just because we have a bunch of younger teams playing. We have that G10s division that it was at 7 teams, I believe, last year, or 5 teams last year, and we're up to 12 this year. So like that's cool. So there's always been growth. Um, I don't see, I don't know how courts are really going to be affected there. Obviously, we're going to need more courts. So if you have a court or if somebody out there has courts that they want to rent out or talk to me about renting out, I'm completely open to those conversations. Obviously there's some things that need to be flushed out at every site, but yeah, no, we're always looking to grow, and kind of those challenges are gonna come with it. And as far as like formatting and stuff like that goes with divisions, I don't really foresee anything coming, but we're always open to suggestion from club directors and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, you kind of led me into my next question. If somebody does have a gym that they're interested in offering to you, what are some of the parameters? I know, for example, like a one court facility doesn't really help us very much unless it's really, really close to another one court
Right.
facility where teams could swap and things. But what are some of the parameters if somebody wants to offer up their facility?
Definitely. So one court, yeah, like you said, is not useful to us, to be honest. And typically the overhead of a place like that, they're not going to make. I know people don't do it for money necessarily, but they're not going to cover their cost of even running an event. So I would say 2 courts are the minimum. Adequate parking space is always wanted. Obviously, not every site is that, but that's what's wanted. Spectator space is obviously a big deal. Um, more on the girl side than the boy side, but like space for team camps, things like that. Those are obviously like big factors that go into club volleyball. Um, Trying to think of what else. So spacing between courts is kind of a big deal if you have more than one court. I typically try to ask for any courts that have even numbers, so 2, 4, so on and so forth. Obviously, like for our club and championship divisions who don't cross within their pools, 3 courts I can make work every once in a while. So that's kind of, I guess, the very broad uh, standards that we need to hit.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me, again, thank you for your time this morning, by the way. Give me the three big takeaways for parents from your presentation here. What are the three things that you want parents to know before we sign off here?
I would say first, be prepared to travel, especially if you're a metro team. Um, and if you are traveling more than once to Tucson or Prescott or anywhere like that, uh, try not to take it personally. I promise you it's not personal. It is part of what you signed up for. The second thing would be schedules are posted on AES, as you typically by Tuesday at the latest. I try to get them out Monday morning if possible, but sometimes with tournaments that lead up to other tournaments, I have to wait for rankings and whatnot. And the third thing, don't know if I have a third thing. I would say those are the two biggest things. I think those are
Okay.
my two big rocks. I don't know if I have a third one.
Okay. I think I kind of just want to throw this in quickly for the parents to understand that, um, you know, we we complain when we go 1 hour, 1.5 hours to drive and stuff. And there are some regions, if you were to move, and go other places in our country, that literally the closest tournament is going to be 15 hours away, or it
Yeah.
might be 12 hours away, or you're going to play a qualifier in St. Louis and the next weekend in Chicago and the next weekend in, Biloxi, Miss. I mean, so we need to put this in perspective that the fact that the Arizona region runs our own tournaments, we are able to keep you A, within the state, and B, trying not to let you drive an exorbitant amount of time. And I think sometimes our parents and teams get a little spoiled, because
Yeah.
they something's not across the street,
Yeah, we are definitely blessed. Like, I mean, even I have a lot of friends who coach in California, even that have to travel hours. Sometimes that's just because of traffic, not because because it's a distance thing. But that is a big issue in other regions, and we are blessed for the most part that we're only drive the farthest some of us have to drive is 2 hours to go play. Some of us get the benefit of traveling only 20 minutes, so it's definitely a blessing that we have here.
Yeah. Joaquin, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate
Of
your
course.
insights, appreciate the information. Parents, stay tuned for more Parent Information Network things coming. And everyone, take care, have a good day, and we will talk to you soon.